Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum, Irini Mazisu, Pax Vobiscum, peace be unto you, and welcome to 2 Samuel, chapter 3. There are 39 verses. It's going to take us a while to get through this. Oh, pardon that bump there. I want to cover the names of the sons of David because they're significantly different in the Septuagint, and David is a very major character in the scriptures. So in verse 2, Ammon versus Amnon, Daluiah versus Eliab, Orniah versus Adoniah, and lastly, Yether Ram versus Ithream. That one's the closest, probably, as well as the Ammon and Amnon. So in verse 6, we can see here that Abner was governing the house of Saul, versus he made himself strong for the house of Saul. What does that mean? Does that mean he is in the gym doing strength training? He's going, oh, no, that's not what's happening. He's governing the house of Saul. He's overseeing the governance of the house. He's in a prominent position there, not making himself physically strong, as it may be interpreted. Verse 7, there's an omission of Ishbosheth. It says here, Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, said to Abner. Well, notice that was an insertion in the Masoretic, but it's indeed part of the original text in the Septuagint. How did they know it was him speaking? Well, because of the Septuagint, obviously. Verse 8, I have this day wrought kindness with the house of Saul, versus which against Judah. That's nonsense, doesn't make any sense, so I'm just going to gloss over that. There's no reason to have against Judah. So the correct rendering is, I have this day wrought kindness with the house of Saul, your father. Okay, that's what Abner did. Verse 8, I have not gone over to the house of David, versus I have not delivered you into the hand of David. So he's saying I have not switched camps. I didn't go to David's camp. I'm still with you, Ishbosheth. Versus I could have betrayed you into the hand of David. That is a clear threat. And then in verse 12, it says David sent messengers, or Abner sent messengers to David to Thalam. That's where he was. That's the name of the place. Versus sent messengers to David on his behalf, which is evident. That's an obvious conclusion. And then it says immediately saying, versus whose the land. So whose land does this belong to? Again, nonsensical. And then it says here, make your covenant with me, versus a league. Now, those are very close in meaning. But a covenant is an oath or a vow. But a league, at least to me, seems to be an alliance that is made between two nations, two kings, or two people. Verse 13, with a good will. This is David's response. With a good will, I will make with you a covenant. So with good intentions, I will do this. Versus, well, I will make a league with you. So he's basically saying in the Masoretic, surely, yes, certainly, I will do this. I'm going to do it. Okay, yes. But no, we're seeing David is actually telling Abner, I will make a covenant with you with good intentions. My motives are good. Okay, that's verse 13. Verse 18 says here, out of the hand of the Philistines, that was added. Okay. Verse 20, a banquet versus a feast, banquet of wine, specific with wine, not a wild difference. Actually, it should be ignored. Anyway, verse 21, this is a callback to verse 13, which we just read, when Abner said, I, Abner, will make with him a covenant. Versus that they, that is all of Israel will make a league with you. Why would the people make a covenant with their king? They are the ones under his authority. Okay, so that doesn't make any sense. Verse 24. He has departed in peace. Talking about Abner. So David told Joab, Abner has departed in peace, versus he is quite gone, which is stating the obvious. He's very much gone. He's not here anymore. Verse 25, a significant difference. Joab tells David, don't you know the mischief of Abner? I'm just paraphrasing here. Don't you know the mischief of Abner? Don't you know what kind of person he is? He came to deceive you and to know your whereabouts, to know everything you do. He's spying on you. Verses in the Masoretic, you know Abner, you know what kind of person he is. So this is a questionable statement given all that had transpired, as well as the context. So in verse 27, it says here, Joab brought Abner back to Hebron against his will. They, just to be frank, they kidnapped him. That's what they did. Versus Abner returned to Hebron. It sounds like Abner made a decision on his own to do this. He went voluntarily. No, that's not what happened. And then in same verse 27, a big difference. It says here, they were laying wait for him. They were waiting to ambush him. That's what it means. Versus they spoke, they took him aside in the gate to speak with him quietly. So that was I think that's the cover story. They're trying to bring him to the gate in order to speak with him. And then the Masoretic adds quietly, so it's supposed to be a hush-hush meeting, a stealthy meeting, a secret meeting. But they omit this very important detail, this detail of laying in wait for him. And then we see a continuous difference of smote in the loins, which I have to admit most likely is a mortal wound. That's not something where, as I mentioned in the previous video, you do this in order for the person to survive and die a slow death. Like a warning shot. No, I think that really is meant to kill. Also, I believe this is an eye for an eye, because that is the same way Asahel died, by being struck in the loins, smote in the loins. So he was executed the same way Asahel was. And perhaps I believe that Abner made a covenant with David for his own protection. And the scripture explicitly says that. They made a covenant. And then verse 28 actually confirms that this covenant was indeed between Abner and David, not Israel and David. Let's read it in the Masoretic first. Afterward, David heard about Abner being killed. He said, I and my kingdom are guiltless before Yah forever from the blood of Abner the son of Ner. So he would be guilty if he was aware, but because they made a covenant, that's why he's mentioning I'm guiltless, because they made a covenant, but he was not aware of what had transpired and even what Joab had done. So it pretty much says the same thing in both translations for this verse. Okay, verse 30, significant difference. laid wait continually. So Joab and Abishai had premeditated this murder of Abner for a long time, continually. Versus they just slew Abner. So it just happened out of the blue, just they bumped into him and they decided to kill him on the spot. No, that's not what happened. This was premeditated. They planned this way in advance to the point they kidnapped him and then planned this meeting where they used this cover of "we're gonna just speak to you," but little did Abner know they planned to kill him all along. Okay, verse 33. This is a possible big difference, but I think you're going to agree with me it's not so much of a difference. Because initially I believe that Nabal was referring to the former husband, the deceased husband of Abigail, but the word Abner in Hebrew actually means fool. So, did Abner die the death of Nabal? Okay, let's look into this. Nabal died of natural causes. No one murdered him, so that rules that out. Okay, what else? Is David covering up that Joab murdered Abner? That's another question I personally had. And we're going to find out no, he did not cover it up because the people found out about it. They were aware of this murder. Okay, so let's read in the Masoretic. It says, died Abner as a fool dies. So shall Abner die according to the death of a fool, which is what Nabal means. So it's pretty similar there. Verse 34, one brought you not near as Nabal. So one brought you not close as a fool. So Nabal was not brought near to David, the actual Nabal, the former husband, deceased husband of Abigail, which means that this is not referring to Nabal, the proper person Nabal, but again, more likely a fool. David says, your hands were not bound, your feet were not put in fetters. So he was kidnapped, but he was not a prisoner per se. He was brought not near as a fool. So what does it mean to die as a fool? And to be brought near as a fool. So number one, he died as a fool. Did a bit of research here. He died as a fool, Abner did, because he was deceived. He did not know what he was getting into. He just fell for the trap like a fool would. He was completely unaware. He was caught unawares. He was not wise as a serpent or wise to the motives of Joab and Abishai, the men of Joab. He was brought near as a fool. Actually, it says brought not near as a fool, but he was brought near as a fool because he was kidnapped by Joab. Okay. But a more wise, strong man, or at least not saying he's not wise or strong, but in that situation, he did not exemplify strength or wisdom because he simply went along thinking that, David was the one who possibly maybe it was David he was thinking that approved of Joab fetching to get him. But David, as we read in the account, was completely unaware of the situation. I think that's in, what verse is that here? 26. Joab returned from David, sent messengers to Abner after him, and they brought him back from the well of Searam, but David knew not, so he was unaware. He was not part of this plan. Okay, and then verse 37, talking about the people. The people were aware that Abner was murdered. All the people in all Israel perceived in that day that it was not of the king to slay Abner. So they knew he was murdered, but they perceived it was not David's. He was not part of that conspiracy, that plan of premeditated murder of Abner. It was Joab acting on his own to do that. Verse 38, 39 rather. Significant difference. It says here, this is David expressing his humility. I am this day a mere kinsman of his, talking about Abner, and as it were a subject in comparison to Abner. Versus, I am this day weak because of the fasting, perhaps, though I am anointed king. So, no, why would he express his weakness? And why would he say I'm weak although I'm anointed king? I mean, it does make a little bit of sense, but we can see David's his strong humility. He saw himself as a kinsman, as a subject of Abner. He didn't see himself as higher than Abner. He respected him very much. And the footnote for this verse says, although appointed by a king, a subject which is appointed by a king. And then this last verse also says how David described the sons of Zeruiah, which is Joab and his brothers, who are technically his nephews, because Zeruiah is the sister of Jesse, David's father. He says they are too hard for David. What does that mean, too hard? It means they are too cruel for me. Could also mean fierce. I don't think it's fierce. David was fierce. It could mean stubborn, could mean violent, but I think the best definition is most likely cruel. They're too cruel for David. David is not a cruel man. He is a fierce man. He is a man of war, but he is not somebody who crosses these boundaries into cruelty. So that's all for this video. I believe it's a very eye-opening video in terms of David, his motives, and also Joab and what kind of person he is. And this is the political thriller side of the book of the Kingdoms, which is known as Samuel. And really, I was very excited to just read through this narrative. So thank you very much for your time. I hope these differences were enlightening to you. Until next time, we'll look at chapter 4, 2 Samuel. And I bid you all Shalom Alechem, Assalamu Alaikum, Irini Mazisu, Pax Vobiscum, peace be unto you, and Maranatha.